All right, boys and girls, we are back with another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. Happy to be joined today by culture editor at the Federalist, Emily Jashinsky. Emily, thanks so much for taking the time to join me for what is kind of an emergency edition of the Federalist Radio Hour, given a really, really important breaking story that we've all been talking about over the course of the holidays and felt like it really needed to be addressed in a full and sufficient manner, which I'm sure we aren't going to get to today because we just don't have enough time. We only have an hour, as the title says, to talk about this story. What story are we talking about today, Emily?
Hello, Ben, and you'll notice I said that with the H being silent, as in Hilaria. So listeners may have guessed at this point that we will be discussing Hilaria Baldwin, also known as Hillary Thomas, wife of famed actor, celebrated actor, illustrious actor. Yeah, from Boston. Alec Baldwin. There are serious reasons that we're talking about this. It does have a lot to tell us about the media. It has a lot to tell us about celebrity culture. And it's also just hilarious. It's been an incredible narrative to follow, but in those sort of like murky days between Christmas and New Year's. I think it's the gift that all of us needed to close out 2020. And it's a real pleasure to be here, Ben.
So I want you to walk through for me. First off, let me say this. I have known who she is primarily because Alec Baldwin shows up in a lot of podcasts and things that I listen to with comedians and the like. You know, he was on Conan O'Brien this year. You know, he's had, you know, he's done Comedians in Cars, you know, things like that. And that's where he typically brings up his wife, who I mostly just know of as like an Instagram influencer who has a bunch of kids and that they all have Spanish names. And that's all I could probably tell you about her before this past couple of days, in which I have learned so much and gone down so many rabbit holes. Tell us a little bit about how this played out, like the TikTok of what happened here that made this story explode.
Yeah, because there have been rumblings, like former classmates of hers have posted to Twitter or to other message boards in years past saying, I went to school with her, she's not Spanish, et cetera, et cetera. But basically what happened, I believe was right at the day after Christmas, it may have even been Christmas, people started to, she basically got into a fake feud with Amy Schumer. She thought Amy Schumer, the comedian Amy Schumer, posted a picture of her that was meant to be mean. It was a joke, and then both of them just sort of like got over it and started laughing about it. But in the interim, people started saying like, okay, Hilaria, if you want to go there, if you want to sort of pick these fights, let's sort of take a look at your background. And so there were some threads on Twitter. There's an epic Instagram story by Tracy Morrissey. And I think between the thread and the Instagram story, that's what really kicked it off. But the Instagram story is incredible because it juxtaposes videos of Hilaria Baldwin, who is from Boston. She was raised in Boston to American parents who have no Spanish heritage whatsoever. And we know this because internet sleuths literally went and found death announcements, and her parents are both professors, or at least one of them's a professor. So they've spoken publicly about some of this stuff. Like there are mountains of evidence that Hilaria Baldwin should have known existed to prove that she really had no Spanish heritage. She said she grew up both in Spain and in Boston. That's her story now. I don't know what that means. I think her family probably just vacationed in Spain, to be honest. I think her father has a degree in Spanish literature. But basically, just to sort of wrap things up, Hilaria Baldwin has been telling people, misleading people. She said on a podcast at one point that she moved here to go to NYU when she was 19. She very carefully made it sound like she moved from Spain, not from Boston. And so that's how this all, she's been feigning a Spanish accent. There's these like incredible moments that people are pulling up of her speaking in a basically a pretty heavy Spanish accent in news broadcasts and interviews. She gave all of her children Spanish names. She speaks very carefully, kind of about to allude to Spanish heritage without sort of ever explicitly saying anything. So she's been kind of clever about it, but then there have been other times where it's like she's fumbling for the word, the English word for cucumber. And
yes,
I'm
no, I think
play
that's the video that really set this thing off to an even greater degree.
Yeah, it's exactly. Here it is.
Very few ingredients. We have tomatoes. We have how do you say it? Cucumbers. We have red pepper.
So the response that we actually had from our art critic Billy Newton to this, who admittedly has no idea who Hilaria Baldwin is, was that, well, that the actual literal translation of the phrase for "I couldn't give an F" in Spanish is "I don't even give a cucumber," which makes it like all the more kind of appropriate. But in this instance, there's a couple of things going on that, to me, make this more than just a random internet celebrity kind of boosting or suggesting they have a more interesting past than they do, because there's a couple of things, and we can get into like the entertainment media side of this a little bit later. But we are all familiar now with the stories of Rachel Dolezal and of plenty of other candidates who have been suggesting that they were something they were not ethnically for a long time. People who basically take on certain aspects of a culture and pretend that it's really a big part of who they are, without actually having any real connection to it. This is something that's even a comedy trope. It shows up in a lot of different things of people who take one vacation to a place and then dramatically overpronounce words. And to be honest, the thing that I was trying to remember when I was watching this, what it reminded me of, and I thought it was from a TV show, but it was actually from an interview where Julie Bowen from Modern Family was on Ellen, and Ellen was this is in sort of the truth about Ellen kind of phase where people were still like treating her like a nice person, and she was making fun of Sofia Vergara's obviously very heavy accent, and Julie Bowen did like a whole imitation of it and over imitating her, and they were talking about what kind of dress they should wear on the show, and she was like, yes, but is it cocktail? Is it cocktail? Does it have fruit and plants on it so they know it's for the daytime? So anyway, the over sort of exaggerated accent thing is a whole trope there. And so the biggest question that I have for you, Emily, after this though, is, having seen the sort of initial threads and then the reaction threads from the Baldwins, including Alec, including Hilaria, do you think that she was doing that in private all along too? Like making Alec a dupe, as opposed to something that they were kind of both in on that he just chose to ignore or chose to play up? What do you think was really his mindset about this?
No, this is an important point because Alec Baldwin is a very powerful celebrity, and he does actually wield a lot of power in Hollywood. He actually wields a lot of power in politics, and he has been on talk shows. That I've seen this more than once. He did this on Stern. He did this on another late night show where he was imitating his wife, and he's like, oh, my wife is from Spain. And then he puts on this egregious, sort of comically bad Spanish accent. But when he imitates his wife, he's saying she's from Spain. She sounds like this. She's Spanish. She is from Boston. And so I think my best guess is Hilaria Baldwin, before she married Alec Baldwin, was a yoga instructor. And that was kind of her whole thing. It was like Alec Baldwin is running around with this yoga instructor that's 26 years younger than him. Suddenly they have, this entire brood of, young children with these Spanish names. She like very carefully curated this image for herself as, I don't know if this is the right word, but I think she wanted people to see her as like exotic and foreign. She
was on the cover of Hola magazine and featured in Latina magazine. Yeah, like it makes you a lot more interesting than just Hillary from Boston.
Yes, it does. Well, especially, and this is to your point, in this day, it absolutely does. There's a premium on that sort of like foreign identity in Hollywood because it gives you that like extra identity point. And so it gives you that dimension as a celebrity that you can sell for publicity, you can sell it for advertising, you can sell it for all of that stuff. And so it was like a system that's incentivized by our culture that puts a premium on these like identity cards. And that's why you have people like Hilaria Baldwin changing her name from Hillary to Hilaria. So my best guess at all of this is that Alec Baldwin sort of gradually came to realize that she wasn't like Spanish, but he likes the story and she does speak fluent Spanish and she loves the culture and her parents are legitimately retired in Spain.
So show us an example of him doing that, if you could.
Yeah, here's one.
My wife's on the phone with her hairdresser or her friend. She's like, really? Okay, I can't wait to see you. That's going to be great. Fantastic. What time? 12 o'clock? My wife is from Spain. And she said, blah, blah, blah.
He sounds literally like Julie Bowen doing the Sofia Vergara accent. Like that's exactly
like he's doing a reverse. He's like doing a reverse Lucy and Ricky. You know,
he's both Lucy and Ricky because it's 2020.
The thing that is, you just said something that sparked something in my brain that I hadn't even thought of before. If you're an Instagram influencer and you're just a white yoga instructor from Boston, then you don't get on the list of, well, we need to market a product to professional young Latina women who might be pregnant. You know, what's the list look like for the Instagram audience? Well, it looks like these 5 accounts. Okay. And that includes obviously this woman who's frequently pregnant and doing yoga poses in high heels and showing off in lingerie very quickly after she gives birth, in setting all sorts of unrealistic standards. It's oh man, that's so depressing. It's just so it's a downside of this whole social media capitalism environment in terms of the way that these accounts are now used for marketing products. The other thing is, I've seen lots of this kind of held up, is she was really kind of using her family as part of this advertising maneuver, including, like a lot of stuff on her Instagram that was, that was part of that. I don't know. That's kind of a sad thing about social media. This story is so many where we all should sort of sit back and say, I realize that there are these different tropes and caricatures that the different prominent social media people try to adopt for themselves. This family is the Western family, and this family is the athlete family, and this family, and it's like, can't people just be people as opposed to having to be slotted into these little boxes? But then I guess that's an old-fashioned pre-social media fantasy.
Well, I was going to say, this is something that tells us about what we've incentivized through our culture. And it tells us something about our culture. It tells us what there's a premium on. And I have a piece that will be in the Federalist, obviously, about this. This is a way, the entertainment media is a way for rich people to get richer because they have become lapdogs, I think, in a way that we haven't necessarily seen before. And a lot of that actually is because the pendulum has swung from the Perez Hilton era of the aughts, where bloggers sort of democratized entertainment media in the same way they did political media and were criticized for being too mean. And now that we've had these like anti-bullying campaigns for a decade, there's this sort of like vaguely woke notion of treating celebrities with kid gloves, and it makes them protagonists. And of course, this is also for access. That's always been going on in entertainment media. It's because of stan mobs. Of course, they're going to cover Beyonce like a hashtag girl boss, and everyone who sort of is like imitating Beyonce, they're going to cover them like a hashtag girl boss. And so there are a lot of reasons for this, but basically Hilaria Baldwin, because she had the story, I think a lot of like young reporters who aggregate stuff for like People and Us Weekly probably didn't want to dig too deep. Like they probably noticed her accent was fluctuating, but they were probably like, that's her truth. That's what they're conditioned to see it as through their university education and our wonderful system here. And so, yeah, I think that's essentially this speaks to a rot in our culture and into entertainment media, which a lot of people just don't realize how huge. Most people who talk about this pay most attention to political media. A lot of people in the country, a huge chunk of the country, really pays much closer attention to entertainment media than political media, which leaves a huge blind spot for observers of media corruption and bias. And this really, I think, speaks to the rot in entertainment media.
So it's kind of bifurcated now. You're either like in the super mean category of accounts on Instagram that post blind items and the like, or you are a kind of corporatized media entity that's part of a larger conglomerate. I mean, Hilaria Baldwin herself worked for Extra as like a correspondent. If you're part of that, you're also like, you're owned by a company, and that company probably has relationships with TV and relationships with movie studios. And part of their bread and butter is getting access to, major celebrities and the like. Alec Baldwin himself has spent the last, several years employed by NBC to play Donald Trump on Saturday Night Live, connected to Lorne Michaels, one of the most powerful people in the industry. And this is one of the things that I just think is kind of missed in the way that these stories are reported. So you used the word internet sleuths earlier about the folks who were digging into this. And it was amazing to me how quickly you could find out about this just with a few Google searches. I mean, determining where she's born is a very basic thing. Like if you're doing any kind of profile of a celebrity, it's like, oh, where are you from? And if they say Mallorca, then that's something that is, or their representative says that, that's something that you should be able to just really quickly check, like, okay, well, but like, were you in Mallorca or were you in a different part of Spain, or like where were you actually physically born? And if it ends up turning out that her equivalent of kind of, I grew up in Boston and Spain is we went to Spain every year or so, or every couple of years for vacation, and I really liked it, which I actually think might be the likeliest results of
I think that's exactly it.
Yeah. That's ludicrous. That's absolutely ludicrous. When I was growing up, I was born in Mississippi. I grew up in South Carolina. And when I go back there and spend a significant amount of time there, I might like have a few inflections in words that I used to have when I was younger come back because I had a little bit of a Southern accent. But, for the most part, like that's not something that carries over. And other than the occasional use of y'all, you're not going to like hear me deploy any kind of words or phrases with frequency. And to say that, like, I'm trying to think of a place that would be the equivalent. I don't know. I went to Maine, occasionally when I was a kid, like I'm taking on some kind of trope and saying that you're from there. It's just so, it's so dumb. And but it's also, I think, as you said, indicative of the like hierarchy of, if you want attention, if you want to have a more interesting identity, then you have to go this way. One of the things that she famously claimed was that, similarly to Meghan Markle, I think, and other people, that she like didn't know who Alec Baldwin was the first time that they met each other, because she said she didn't have a television set in Spain when she was growing up. Now, I just want to put in perspective that she admits she's from Boston. She grew up in Boston and in Spain, if we accept that. She went to college, but she is from Boston and going to school in Boston, NYU, at the same time that The Departed comes out, a movie which prominently features Alec Baldwin delivering one of the worst Boston accents that you will ever see in film, infamously bad. and something that would have been like a poster on tons of people's walls in college in 2006. You can't tell me you avoided that movie. Like, I mean, this is a Boston-based movie. It's a Scorsese movie. It prominently features this person who is famous and known, and the fact that she would just like claim, "Oh, I don't know who you are," and then him sort of being attracted to the idea of someone who doesn't know his celebrity, someone who seems interesting and exotic, has maybe weird words for things, or drops into a different language or tone when she's on the phone. Like, it just seems, I feel like he was duped here. I feel like he really thought that she was someone else, someone that she was not.
He definitely did, because it's not as though she would have. And by the way, The Departed is Ben's smoking gun. He is insistent. This is what unravels the whole Hilaria lie. It's The Departed. But no, it's not as though.
Find me a person in Boston who hasn't seen The Departed. I mean, come on.
Perfectly fair. But this is like, there's no way she went up to him and was like, "Hi, I'm Hillary." No, of course, he's known her as Hilaria. She probably spoke in the accent. And it sort of also reminds me of the episode of Friends where Ross puts on an English accent for his first day of lectures at NYU, actually, and then gradually has to phase it out. And it's a very sort of clumsy phasing out of this terrible British accent. That's what Hilaria has done. You can see it actually already in interviews, and it's what she's going to, like, how is she going to do an interview again? Like, is she going to keep doing these accents? Because what we know, she's already said she did 2 Instagram videos defending herself, and then Alec did some Instagram videos defending her, where he threatened people, told them to like F off, and made all sorts of like hilarious, perfectly Baldwin statements. It's exactly what we've come to know and love from Alec Baldwin. You could have expected it, but it's like her story is that she goes between speaking Spanish and speaking English because her family lives in Spain. So when she's speaking a lot of Spanish, she'll then, carry it over into her English. First of all, that doesn't make you forget the word for cucumber. And secondly, she posted text messages with her brother where they were going back and forth only in Spanish recently about the whole thing. It's like, you're from Boston. Why are you speaking to your brother in Spanish? Like, a lot of people live abroad. It's not, they don't have to speak in their second language. It's not your first language. Give me a break. So it's just, this whole thing is so funny and also just such a quagmire for them.
I also should point out that our critic, Billy, again, goes to Spain every year, usually twice a year for extended amounts of time, speaks Spanish fluently, and Catalan as well, and has never told me that he is from Spain. so this is like, that's not the way this works. Okay. Just because you go and live in Japan for a while and learn the language doesn't make you Japanese. It doesn't work this way. So
Ben, you're literally more Spanish than Hilaria is. Significantly.
I am actually, and my daughter is too. So that's like kind of amazing. But the thing that is sort of, I want to shift to kind of the sad part of this, because like there's no real reason to like destroy Hilaria. It's not like she's been some horrible person, other than like the kind of irritating factor with the Instagram posts, but no more irritating than any number of other social media figures. The thing that really bothers me about this is the way that the media has like encircled them to start defending her, and has falsely depicted her for being attacked for something she's not being attacked about. She's being attacked because she heavily implied and occasionally lied about her background and her ethnicity in order to get ahead. Like, that's what people are irritated by. But I mean, look at this. That's just an amazing headline from NBC.
Yeah, and if you're listening, the headline is Hilaria Baldwin is not going to apologize for who she is or sit down or be canceled after her accent and ethnicity were questioned on social media. And then part of the other, that's the tweet. The headline itself says Hilaria Baldwin claps back. It's unbelievable.
I mean, she's not clapping back, and they're not. If you watch the videos from her and from Alec Baldwin, they're basically claiming you're reading a lot of lies about me, and I'm the real victim here, and I just appreciate all your support and things like that. And look, I know that she's going to try to spin her way out of this, and I'm sure that she's going to get defended by, the New York Times and or some other very prominent place that you would be surprised to see. But hey, they just defended Jeffrey Toobin. But the thing that I sort of think is really problematic about this is, to your point about entertainment media, I think this is directly connected to this divide that we have culturally, where certain shows and celebrities are held up as impossible to criticize. How can you go after this person for that? And I'm thinking of like the way that here's a good example. Wrinkle in Time was not a good movie. Like it was bad. I watched it, it was not a good movie. Okay. But there was this whole thing about the reason you don't like this movie is because it's directed by a minority female director, and they changed the white girl who was the lead into a minority female girl. And it's like, no, I don't like it because it's not a good movie. That doesn't have anything to do with it. Both of those things could be true, and you could have made a good movie that actually was like the book, as opposed to completely changing the storyline. And to me, that just it's an example. It's the same thing with Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. All this controversy about it, where people were like, "Oh, this is just they don't like her because she's so cool and super and awesome," and it's just like white men critics are intimidated by her and stuff. And it's like, okay, that would bear more weight if there weren't like 6 other female superheroes in your whole orbit, and if every man on Earth didn't think that Black Widow was cool. And come on, this does not stand up. We were not making these complaints about these other female characters in these series who have superpowers and do all these super things. It's just that Brie Larson is a really wooden actress, and it's not it wasn't a very good performance, and it's the reason why she was so underwritten and underused in the Avengers Endgame, where it was basically like Poochie went back to his home planet with her. So the thing which is a reference you don't get, Emily, because you haven't seen
Nope. Right over my head.
Anyway, the point is, we're not criticizing you, Hilaria, because of any of the stuff that you're claiming. We're criticizing you because you were fake about something, and fake about something in particular that matters to people who are very woke, but is also very funny for people who think that those wokesters emphasize all of this way too much and take it way too seriously.
Well, first of all, I am qualified to comment on Brie Larson's wooden acting, because I am subjected constantly on the Bravo app to my favorite and also least favorite car commercial, wherein Brie Larson she's like, don't settle in like a pay negotiation with a boss, and then doesn't settle, encourages this woman not to settle in to lean in, and then to lean in when it comes to purchasing a car. It's really amazing. It's just the most amazing thing.
I have seen that ad so often. It shows up on Hulu for me constantly, and I just what are you trying to do here? Is this are you trying to sell a car? Or are you trying to make people feel bad for not buying your car? What's the actual? Anyway, continue.
All I know is I'm bringing Brie Larson to my next pay negotiation, Ben. So please prepare for that.
I will mentally prepare for that. If you have not seen the video where she makes it becomes apparent that all of her co-stars are made uncomfortable by her, you have to check it out. It was during the tour of interviews around Captain Marvel, and it was just so it was very, very cringe. In terms of where we kind of go from here with this story, first off, I think it's amazing that in 2020, our media is more interested in getting to the bottom of the Hilaria Baldwin story than it is in the Hunter Biden story. That's one.
That's a fair point.
And two, I think it's very interesting that this could be the starting point for a lot of questions about a lot of celebrities. And I would be very nervous if I was in that category of someone who has maybe appropriated some things that they couldn't necessarily justify family tree wise, because the standards are all going to change. And Ariana Grande has had a little bit of this, but I would expect a lot more. What do you think about that? Do you think that that's where we're headed? Because I certainly do.
Yeah, I think that actually goes to a really important point you made earlier, which is about the bifurcation of the entertainment news media, and that you have some of these gawkers like Dumois, which I wrote about on the Federalist a couple of weeks ago, that are sort of doing this guerrilla blind item journalism on Instagram and in some of the old blogging arenas, traditional blogging arenas, and they're just posting blinds and holding celebrities' feet to the fire. Even those accounts are kind of gentle, and they won't post, pictures that could reveal a celebrity's identity, could reveal a celebrity's location or identity in a situation where the allegation is extremely egregious and hasn't been vetted by police or whatever, but still posts some pretty damaging things. And then you have NBC, as we just read the tweet, covering for Hilaria Baldwin. E! News did the same thing. They, said that she had a unique journey in an Instagram post and said she had a passionate response to the questions raised. It might be because they're afraid of Alec Baldwin, and that also could be fair because Alec Baldwin is famously temperamental and famously Irish. But it's like there's this bubbling up of people who are critical of celebrities, and that's directly a response to, I think, the cushiony coverage that celebrities have been getting recently, because there's a market in this populist moment, in this moment when we have, people like Jeffrey Epstein being revealed for who they are, and Harvey Weinstein. We have all of these elites, sort of the emperor having no clothes moments. There's such an appetite, and there's such an appetite for like real critical stuff, and it's amazing that we had Hilaria Baldwin being so heavily covered by the press, which helped her get advertising deals and helped boost her profile in a way that enriched her family. But nobody checked on why her accent was fluctuating, which was 10 minutes of Googling, and if they checked, they didn't write about it. And so I think where we go from here is that this proves there's a market for people like Tracy Morrissey, who has this giant Instagram story about Hilaria Baldwin that basically laid bare all of this nonsense that she'd been peddling and enriching herself with, and the media was complicit in that. So while this is not the Hunter Biden story, it's not a bombshell, it's not the biggest thing that's ever happened, it's not the most important thing happening in this country, it does speak to kind of what we've talked about in the new Contras, Ben. And that's what you dubbed them, and it's really great. It's a great designation for them, because I think it really gets into, like, there's a huge market right now because people are being underserved by the corporate media when it comes to like honest coverage of our elites, and celebrities should frankly be very nervous if they've been peddling BS, because what Tracy Morrissey and other people showed with Hilaria Baldwin is that this stuff can go viral without being in the New York Times, and it can be really damaging and devastating. And so one final point that I want to make is that while NBC and E have covered Hilaria Baldwin and other outlets in the way that we discussed, I think people, you sort of see online leftists are accusing her of cultural appropriation, and she certainly fits that definition. And so I actually, this is going to be a case sort of like Juicy Smollett, Dave Chappelle's special, but it's like that in when they realize that they totally misread the room, the coverage is going to shift.
Mm-hmm. This also brings me, you brought up the new Contras. We're seeing in the past couple of weeks something that we both predicted, which is that the corporate media would really turn on these Substackers of the world, that, they would describe them as siloing their readers or not giving them a full picture or something like that. And the irony of a situation where a story like this that everyone's talking about is only getting treated as an opportunity for pushback and propaganda by places that, almost assuredly have a number of people who have the same agency, working for them. Hilaria was at CAA. I wonder how many people at CAA have been involved in talking about her. But, it's kind of funny because unless they've done it today, unless they've done it in the last 48 hours, I should say, the New York Times still hasn't told anybody about the fact that Eric Swalwell was connected very personally to a Chinese spy, a member of the Intel Committee and a very prominent Democratic congressional member, connected directly to a Chinese spy who he was warned about and who then fled the country. Kind of a big deal, kind of a big story, kind of something that should probably be in the New York Times, but they're just going to pretend that it didn't happen. And so much of this, I think, has to do with the fact that the corporate press has a lot of incentives to pretend that things don't happen. Sometimes it's connections. Sometimes it's, Michael Barbaro being engaged to the executive producer of the person who did the Caliphate podcast. So he doesn't talk about it, the same way. Part of it is the stuff that you don't even think about, which is just connections to agents or connections to other people within the industry, which is why someone like Alec Baldwin, who's not exactly, a big movie star anymore in the same way that he used to be, can wield the amount of power that he does. I think that this is the beginning of a cascade of a lot of people who, when they get into a fight where they don't read the room right, they could have some consequences now for things that would have been let slide by the Entertainment Tonights of the world, back when John Tesh was the biggest thing, who was telling you about what was going on in Hollywood. And Mary Hart's still around, still looking great. But just think about this for a second. Circling back to where this whole thing started, it started with literally a post from Amy Schumer just making fun of her, making a little joke. I doubt Amy Schumer.
Joan Rivers.
Yes.
It's hardly Joan Rivers stuff, right?
Yeah.
She didn't go knives out.
No, at all. I mean, I doubt that Amy Schumer thought for more than 90 seconds about that. It was more like, oh my gosh, look at this ridiculous person. A lot of my girlfriends are talking about her. I'll post something making fun of her. And now we have this, a series of several days of additional stories. Look, I don't know who's next, but I do think that there are going to be people who come next. And I'm curious to see what the reaction is going to be like in Hollywood, because I feel like there's going to be people who try to get out ahead of it, and it's going to be interesting when we start to read those pieces. For years, people have thought for some reason that I was this. In actuality, I'm
you
just
may have thought I was Spanish.
Yes. I mean, people thought the person who has to be the most mad about all of this has to be that I think it's Adam Rappaport, who used to be at Bon Appetit, who was accused of doing brownface in a Halloween costume or something years ago to disguise himself as Puerto Rican. He always maintained that he didn't do that. It was like a filter on the phone or something like that. But it just is come on, man. I didn't pretend to actually be this for years and feign an accent and everything like that. I don't know. I don't think Condé Nast is going to look any kinder on him for it. So
no, probably not. Well, see, people on the left would say that right now we're calling for cancel culture, and I'm not. First of all, I think Hilaria Baldwin, exactly as you said, should come out and own this and just be yeah, I have white girl study abroad syndrome, and I decided to go by Hilaria instead of Hillary because I thought it made me different and interesting, and I like Spanish culture. But I mean, this is it's not cancel culture because it's not about their wrong think, right? I don't care whether Hilaria Baldwin has heterodox thoughts on politics. That's not why, you know, she deserves to be called out. And whatever other celebrities are the victims of this cascade that I think you're accurately predicting, nobody's suggesting they be canceled for violating the boundaries of acceptable thought. It's actually because these are wealthy people who've enriched themselves off of telling lies, and lies that the entertainment media has been complicit in letting them get away with. And again, it's not the biggest thing that's happening in the country, but it is sort of why we have a media culture that is lenient towards Hunter Biden. And to the extent that it can be called out, to the extent that it can be corrected, even if by bloggers and Instagram users, it absolutely should be. So the other Hilarias hiding in Hollywood should be very scared.
Yeah. No, they saw Snatch once and they decided to become a pikey. Or no, better. They saw 7 years in Tibet.
No, but they wouldn't, because then they would lose all of the money from China.
Exactly.
China.
No, you're correct about that. So let's go out on this, Emily. How do you think? How long do you think we will have to wait? And I realize that we're still, New York's in, lockdown or whatever. How long do you think we have to wait until we see the spittle-flecked, obscenity-filled rant from Alec Baldwin at a TMZ cameraman or someone else about this issue? Because that's what I'm waiting for next.
So I had a thought about this just this morning, because I mentioned that to you a couple days ago. Like I'm just like so excited for the moment a photog catches Baldwin, in the Upper East Side, getting his coffee, and just triggers an incredible reaction that sends him into a fit of rage and calls somebody a pig. But he's actually, like, in this day and age, we no longer need celebrities to be provoked by paparazzi, because Alec Baldwin allowed Twitter to provoke him. Like, he literally went on camera and was just like pulling up tweets from random people and saying like F you. And it's like, he doesn't even need to be provoked anymore by, somebody throwing a lens in his face. He can just do this from the comfort of his own home of his own volition. I'm just going to sit down.
I am just happy. I mean, it warms my heart to wake up this morning and to read on the Daily Mail that Ireland Baldwin has posted a follow-up video to let everyone know that she considers herself an ally of the Latinx community. It really did. Like, that has made the difference for me. I know it does as well for my entire family. And we appreciate it, Ireland.
You should check with your daughter, Ben.
I'll ask if she shares that opinion. All right, Emily. Well, I think that we've spent enough time on this for the moment, but I have to tell you, I feel like there's more to come. I feel like there's more to come on this storyline. But thank you for joining me for this emergency edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I appreciate it.
It's been my honor.
All right, everybody. We'll be back soon with more of the Federalist Radio Hour. Until then, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.